If I were a newly elected member of Congress, I would focus on the issue of gun control that will impact America by the year 2040.
In 2023, there have been 131 mass shootings, with 4 more people wounded or killed so far. Same time last year, there were 113. The number of victims in all years is the U.S. population. The goal is to not invalidate the Second Amendment as if it created dangerous precedent in regards to trifling constitutional rights, but to instead make it a stricter process to own a firearm or assault weapon. This is incredibly important to us as students who have to do ALICE drills, and we want a nation where we can be safe, especially in a place where we learn. With gun-related deaths rapidly rising by the year, it's not a question that at this pace by 2040 we would see unprecedented amounts of gun violence if not controlled. The idea is to not punish law-abiding gun owners, but instead make sure that criminals don't get their hands on any. From stricter background checks to a higher emphasis on civilian reports, we aim to cut gun access for those who are likely to commit a mass shooting. We also aim to stem access to assault weapons that cause unprecedented levels of harm when that level of intensity is simply not needed for a civilian weapon. Ideally, we'd also want to focus on gun education and remove glorification and drive the youth and general public away from wanting to use firearms in a destructive manner. It starts with the American people, and if we work together, we can make our communities a better and safer place where we can easily achieve this goal.
Now let's take a look at the differences between having gun restrictions and not having them.
Maryland, Washington, D.C., Cook County, Illinois, all have some of the strictest gun country laws in the country, including limiting magazines to only 10 rounds. By comparison, in Florida, there are significantly less restrictions and no limits on magazine size in the state of Florida.
Would the gentleman yield for the question?
Jacksonville, Florida, the largest city by area in my state, the murder rate was more than half of DC or Chicago in 2021, and you are 4 times lower, and it was 4 times lower than in Baltimore, Maryland. All jurisdictions that have a magazine ban, you're safer in the state of Florida where we don't have it.
Let's look at how crucial this matter is and what's actually being done.
This is absurd. This is absurd. After one child died using a Peloton treadmill last year, the Consumer Product Safety Commission intervened and recalled the product. But when hundreds of children die using guns, there is no federal response. There is no federal safety standard for guns. Even though 40,000 Americans hurt or kill themselves or other people in hundreds of accidents every year. Instead of regulating guns like any other consumer product, federal law protects gun manufacturers. A teenager can watch a video online and learn how to modify a rifle to make it more deadly. And the gun industry avoids any liability if that teenager uses that modified rifle to fire repeatedly and rapidly at innocent people, even though their products could be designed to prevent unsafe modifications.
Now, let's look at the data and how impactful gun ownership may actually influence society.
But how about the more straightforward question of whether owning a gun makes you more or less safe? One widely influential study that has constantly resurfaced in headlines since it was published in the New England Journal of Medicine in 1993 concluded that, rather than confer protection, guns kept in the home are associated with an increase in the risk of homicide by a family member or intimate acquaintance. Brown says there are major problems with this study. First of all, the researchers concluded that keeping a gun at home increases a person's risk of being killed. But nearly half the murders they included in their analysis were not committed with a firearm. And among gun owners who were killed with a gun, the authors didn't establish whether the weapon used was the victim's own gun or if it belonged to another person. But Brown says the main reason research on this topic is inconclusive is because the answer almost entirely depends on individual differences that can't easily be controlled for in social science research.
A gun expert with a gun safe in a high-crime neighborhood may well be safer with a gun, whereas a careless alcoholic living in a low-crime area who keeps loaded guns in his kid's closet is certainly going to be less safe. People want a simple overall answer to whether guns make you less safe or more safe.
A 9mm bullet blows the lung, a single bullet. Biden clearly doesn't wish to tighten gun control and actually diminish the amount of gun violence in the name of what? Freedom? The right for self-protection is crucial, but it does not warrant a 22-round ammunition that could end a life within a millisecond.
On Monday, Biden stated a 9mm bullet blows the lung out of the body, and I quote, "So the idea of these high caliber weapons there's simply no rational basis for it in terms of thinking about self-protection. So you can't protect yourself with a 9mm. I guess according to Biden, only a 22 round ammunition would be sufficient. The Democratic majority is discriminating against some of the most popular weapons in the United States simply because they don't like the way they look, not because of the way they function. And there are so many Americans that are confused when they see the semi-automatic rifle that the Democrats want to ban as being fully automatic. It's not. You can't purchase that. It's illegal. It is not a weapon of war. A weapon of war has a fully automatic switch or a 3-round burst.
I admit that that specific policy is quite unreasonable, and the only difference between some of the firearms mentioned is the fact that after you depress the trigger and the round, you have to reload, saving you half a second. Every second counts when it comes to the utilization of guns. That half of a second could save a person's life, albeit last minute. Gun restrictions have a purpose, ensuring self-protection, but only enough for that protection. That's why the title of assault weapons exists. And it also helps refute the counter arguments that people might use the Second Amendment, oh, they need self-protection. But we also need to ensure some safety measures.
Prohibitionist, are you capable of overnight turning into a murderer, committing malicious murder? And most of the time they say, no, I wouldn't. And there's your opening. And that's where you speak to those 80% in the middle and say to that prohibitionist, then how dare you imply everyone listening to you is an incipient potential murderer? The people on my side of this debate have a little more trust in their fellow Americans and their fellow citizens.
Gun restrictions and the fear of violence is not due to the potentiality that gun owners may commit murder. It's the accessibility murderers have to firearms that scare people.
A cycle the country has seemed stuck in for decades. A mass shooting, a push for reform, and then no action.
The tragedy in El Paso.
9 people killed in Dayton.
How many years do we have to go through this?
Congress is paralyzed.
We collectively seem to ask the same question. What does it take to pass some gun reform in this country?
Even though we're stuck in the cycle, doesn't mean we give up on saving lives. Do we just stop? Every form of protest, awareness, or reform is adjusted year after year to ensure higher chances of tighter gun restriction. This is a crucial change that we need to make, and I hope you support my cause. Thank you.